you're a kid, grows up in New York City, and as you're kind of getting older, your parents decide you don't have enough outside exposure, so you spend a lot of time. They buy a house or they rent a house in the summertime, and you go out there in the summer, and there's woods that they want you to play in, so they kind of lock you outside. And they make you go and you play out here, and you meet a neighbor kid, and you and this neighbor really hit it off. You're both kind of nerdy kids, and you hang out every summer for a few summers in a row now, and you play in these woods, and you use your imaginations, and you have fun, and you're growing up, and you start to have like ongoing complex stories in your heads of using your imagination to have a fun time. And while you're out exploring in the woods one day, you find a freaking old school meat truck that's broken down, and as you approach it, due to the lack of smell, you realize, okay, well, like, the meat was cleaned out of here, so, like, cool, and you go and you explore this meat truck, and it becomes your base of operations, and you go out there and you find things, and you're playing games, and you pretend to find evidence of these monsters and things in the woods, and you're doing this all for fun, and then everything kind of takes a drastic change when you and your friend are in your base of operations. You're in your hideout in this truck, and you're telling them something, and while you're mid-sentence, he's like, "Who are you and what do you want?" As he kind of looks directly away from you, and you ask him about it. He's like, "But who the frick is behind that tree over there? That guy is leaned out." And you're like, "What guy?" And you guys kind of look over there, and you wait a little bit, and you're like, "Oh, it must have been nothing." And you both kind of side-eye each other and give the other person a hard time for being so scared, and then you leave, and you and your friend never play in the woods ever again. And that is the start to, I guess that's the beginning story to what became the book that I want to talk to you guys about, Wytches. Scott Snyder is the author of Wytches, and he is most known for his Batman run. Michael's been talking about Scott Snyder's Batman run. And it's phenomenal, but it's a little more on rails. He has to play by a few more DC rules, and Scott Snyder loves horror, and he's known for his love of horror and known for writing horror books. With Wytches, he's allowed to do a lot more of that horror thing. He's not confined in that space. So he teams up. Scott Snyder's first very big DC book he got to write Detective Comics, and people loved his Detective Comics run. And he got this artist named Jock, who has this gritty, almost sketched out, hard to look at, but intentionally so style, which is beautifully done for the story that Scott wrote for Detective Comics, but I think even more so for this Wytches story. Wytches is hard to look at and gross in so many panels, and it's so eerie. Just the whole vibe of the book is eerie and off-putting. Yeah, you look at things and you don't like to look at them, you don't want to look at them, but they're so beautifully done and so artfully done, you still look at it. It's a weird feeling you get while you read this book. So Scott really creates this world, and with Jock's art, it really hits home. But the coolest thing that this book does, I think, is play on some of these things. So this is a book called Wytches that's not about magic in any way, shape, or form. And that's not really a spoiler. You kind of learn about the world, and it's beautifully done and really interesting to me. And I think that I don't know a lot about horror. I'm not a horror buff. Nobody I know on this site is a horror buff and loves horror, but I do know the traditional, hey, the more you learn about the monsters, the less scary it becomes. And without spoiling things, because again, this is a book that is all story. It's very hard to talk about this without spoiling it, and it is a very easy to spoil book. And the idea of knowing what's going to happen when you pick up this book is entirely off-putting. It would ruin the experience. The thing that Scott does that I would imagine is super difficult to do is the more you learn about this world and the world that he's made and these witches and the lore behind them, the scarier they become, which I think is really neat. Like, they tell you, like, the reason that Jaws is scary, right? It's scary because you don't see the shark. But Wytches is scary because you don't see the witches at first, right? And that's scary. And then like as you kind of learn more about them and what's going on, and you even start to see them more and things, they become all the more terrifying. And I think that is a thing that he does that works so well. And really, it's a good story, it's good lore, but that's not really what I want to talk to you about. I don't like horror, I don't really like tense things, but I love Witches, and I can't sing the praises of this book enough. Witches, I think, shines, my personal opinion, shines in its relationship between this dad and the daughter. They show the relationship between a dad and a daughter. And in this horror book, they managed to show you some of the sweetest things I've ever seen in any comic book. That's just this dad helping his kid out and learning how to help his kid and work with his kid when she has horrible, crippling anxiety at times, and helping her work through that is really such a special thing that, like, I cried in this book, and it wasn't because, like, it was so scary or something like that. It was just at beautiful, sweet moments between this dad and this daughter talking to each other and interacting with each other, and the things that you see them do is so sweet and wonderful that it's a very moving book. And I think that's the real hook of Witches. If I had to pitch this book to anybody, it wouldn't be, oh man, like, this works so well and the horror's so scary, which by all means it is. But again, I think the coolest part of this book is not that scary stuff. It is the dad and daughter talking to each other stuff. It is the dad trying to be a good dad. It's the dad learning about his daughter's anxiety and thinking of clever outside the box ways to help his kid work through these things. And it's so wonderful. I love it. So a few disclaimers for this book. I am recommending. I think Witches is a phenomenal read. First thing I need to get out of the way. It's an indie book, so it's mature. There's strong language in it. So if you're a kid out there, and get parents' consent before you read Witches. Another thing is, and by this point, I've already gotten like at least 3 text messages from my sister, who is a big fan of this book, and I'm sure is going to be like, well, I told you to read this forever ago. And my defense to that is, I knew about Witches far before it came out, and I didn't read it, but I wanted to. But disclaimer, for anybody out there who knows my sister might be watching this, or just to hopefully maybe jump the gun on some of the preemptive passive-aggressive texts I get from her, you did tell me about it, but I was going to read it anyway. But yes, my sister did read this book first. And lastly, find time to read it. Like, this is my last disclaimer. If I have to tell you anything about Witches, I think this book is best read straight through, in the dark, getting spooked out of your mind. Because I think that makes the spooky hit all the more, but also it helps the sweet moments just really uplift you, because you're in such a dark place, like, literally, if you're doing it right, and that helps all of those sweet moments just really take you out of it in a good way, not in like I'm out of the story, but lift you up, mentally speaking, in the scariness of the story. Again, I can't recommend this book enough. I'm sure it's not for everybody. If you don't like any scary things at all, it's not for you. If you can handle some scary things and you just really want to see a sweet moments between a dad and a daughter, I think this is the book for you. It is very good. This October, Scott has teased that Witches Volume 2 is going to start coming out around the Halloween time, and I'm excited for it. It leaves at a great cliffhanger, and I really want to know where the story has to go, and I think the idea of him not being put on any sort of rails and being able to explore this world that he's made and where this world's going to go, I'm super interested in. That's going to do it for me today, my review on Witches. And if you liked the video, feel free to give it a like, maybe subscribe if you haven't already. This is the YouTube, and me and Michael are really putting in work trying to get stuff out here every day, so maybe you missed a video, and nobody wants to miss a video, so feel free to hit that bell and get notified every time we release something. Thanks for watching, guys.